What's up, everybody? Just thought I'd go live today. A lot of good stuff happening right now. Oh, man, it's so freaking awesome what's going on. So, yeah, I'm going to do this in a little sequence, and we're going to get straight to the point. So, did you see where the National Guard are being called to Washington, D.C.? Did anybody see that? Yes, you did. If you're paying attention to anything, you saw D.C. that West Virginia, South Carolina, and Ohio are going to Washington, D.C. So, if you know me by now, they ought to reword that now. You could actually rewrite that song to like, if you know me by now, then you will always, always know me. Because you'll know me that if you can believe that President Donald John Trump is president and the National Guard are going into D.C., guess what you can believe now? You can go back and believe troop movements from when? Oh, a time period when old quote-unquote Joe Biden doesn't have what? Anything in his name to do with the National Guard and the reserve components. See, when you're a good person, and or good and smart, good and competent, good and intelligent, all you got to do is just wait a little while, because guess what always happens? The truth will find you out, right? The truth is always the truth no matter what. Now, I know people say, I don't know who to trust anymore, and truth is diluted and facts are diluted. No. Not when you have the actual truth and the actual facts. Well, the actual truth and the actual facts in this case would be what? Laws and orders. So if you can believe, because you can visually see President Trump now in the president's seat, that has nothing to do with anything, because the troop movement has everything to do with what? A law and a what? An order. And then those two will have a what? A visual of what? Enforcement. Yeah, so see, now all of those people who came after me, hated on me, ridiculed me, mocked me, especially the few veterans out there that did that, I'm like President Trump. Sometimes you do have to flex your muscles every now and then. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you got to. Because telling a straight up law and an order, should no one have a problem with that, especially when it's doing what it's doing and it's for humanity. It's not some power tripping thing that President Trump's doing, and he's not the only person around it. So West Virginia, South Carolina, and Ohio are now going to D.C. All right. Says federal support, which that's the case because D.C. is a federal foreign territory. I know that's far-fetched for people to believe, and it is far-fetched to think that we call a piece of property within a big chunk of property a foreign territory. But that's how they labeled it, and that's how it's operated all these years. So therefore you do what? You go in there and you clean out what's been on paper all these years, what's been known, especially militarily known. So now you got to go back to Texas. Well, let's go before that. Let's go to New York. So the very first troop movement that you saw was New York, that don't have any quote-unquote Joe Biden name attached to it. What are the National Guard doing in the subways in New York? Well, when you go look up Executive Order number 28 by Governor Hochul, New York's governor, what's it saying there? It says what? Federal support. Well, that requires a president still. It don't matter if it's Title 10 or Title 32. Federal support still means president. There's no federal support by quote-unquote Joe anywhere to do in New York. So see, when I get my voice raised up like that, I feel like a preacher on Sunday morning, because I'm like, it's the passion, baby. It ain't got nothing to do with being mad or agitated. It's passion. And every one of you should be able to see that, especially if you follow me since the rant coming up on a week from today will be my 3-year anniversary of the viral rant, August 24, 2022, when right down the road, I was in a Ford F-150 4x4 pickup truck, burning my rear end up. My phone don't work to this day hardly there. That tells you God had a hand in it. So, New York. There has to be a presidential order there for federal support. Or guess what we get to do if you weren't away? Like if you're still in Normie land, then this is what you should look like. Now I hate that you're still in Normie land if you are, but if you're in Normie land and there wasn't a presidential order for the troops, then guess what normies could do? Joe Biden, quote unquote, did what? Violated his authority and power to use the National Guard. But because we're not normies, and I can't speak from Normie land because it's nothing to do with that, the National Guard, the reserve components of New York, federal support, no Joe Biden anything. Now let's fast forward to Texas, where your visuals came into play. All right, Texas, February 2024, in Del Rio and Eagle Pass, Texas, the hottest spots on mainstream media. The only spots they showed you about the border being invaded was Del Rio, Texas, and Eagle Pass, Texas. The whole time. They told you that 2,000 dirt poor Haitians went across the Gulf of America, went completely by Florida, completely by Alabama, completely by Mississippi, completely by Louisiana, completely by the part of Texas that you can reach via the Gulf, and went all the way to almost El Paso, Texas, to try to come into the quote-unquote border unlawfully. And they also told you that Nicaraguans and Venezuelans and others crossed all those different countries to come to Del Rio and Eagle Pass. The closest country that the mainstream media was telling you about was 1,536 miles from Del Rio and Eagle Pass, Texas. And you wonder why people like me are a smart ass and smart aleck? It's because IQs that can't comprehend that this was all central casting. The border was real, but it was before President Trump. They're reenacting a bunch of different things because they know the average person is what? Either has cognitive dissonance, one, and then two, it's the old Mark Twain quote. Mark Twain says it's easier to trick somebody, it's easier for someone to be conned, to be tricked, than it is to convince them that they've been tricked or been conned. So you just do a reverse psychological operation, clean it all out, and then when people see the fruits of the labor, when people see the fruits of the Spirit, when people see the fruits of everything, when people see money rolling in, when people see taxes going away, when people see everything the way it's supposed to be, then you can present to people, hey, this is what we did. But see, old Derek Jonhson, old Rattletrap done got a book out. Old Rattle done got a book in place that's already there and shows you what you need to see if you want to know and if you want to escape the regular world, the normie land as we call it. It's already here, it's already there because it's all laws and orders, and the only way this was all made possible were laws and orders. If President Trump did any one thing, even though he's just the face of the operation, but because he is, if he did any one thing that had a loophole on it, all the integrity is wiped away. All of the operation will be compromised by one little loophole. So it can't be done that way. So if you want to escape, then you got to be able to go, now look, the only way military could be done this way, because you don't want to look like the opposite side. See, that's liberals look atrocious, but a lot of Republicans look just as atrocious. Liberals want people arrested. Republicans want people arrested. Well, you gotta have something there, a little thing called what? Circumstantial evidence, and then evidence and proof of what? fraud, treason, everything. So therefore, you got to know what? You got to know what those are and what those consist of and what those entail and what they detail, what they prescribe. That's why now the troops going into D.C. are just a cherry on top. It's a cherry on top for all the patriots. But for those sitting on the fence, you should go right on and hop on down and cowboy, cowgirl up now. Because Texas proves all. Texas is the key because they gave you a visual in Texas. In 2024, February 2024, President Trump was seen at the border of Texas. The only person with a presidential title attached to their name was President Donald John Trump at the border at Eagle Pass in Del Rio, Texas in February 2024. Beside him, even though God love and God bless the governor of Texas, Abbott, he can't stand, he's in a wheelchair, but standing beside him, with all due respect, was the governor of Texas and the adjutant general. That was a visual for you, the people. That was a visual of a chain of command and a rank structure. The adjutant general gives the whole operation away, with President Trump standing in the middle. The adjutant general reports to the governor unless, see that little key word there in prescription form? Unless what? Unless the National Guard are federalized by what? Title 10. Well, there's no Title 10 order in place, or there's no Title 32 for quote-unquote Joe at the border. Now, if you Google that right now, it will tell you that quote-unquote Joe federalized by Title 10. Not when you go clicking on the actual .gov and .mil sites. It says the Secretary of Defense. Secretary of Defense. Secretary of Defense. Well, that's when you got to know laws and orders. Because naturally they got to put something up for a visual for the people because they didn't want to disclose it at that time period. But 14 states deployed to Texas in February 2024. The only Title 10 and Title 32 in place is President Trump. All right. The other thing, for people who are non-military, you do not salute a former commander. You don't at ease a former commander. That's exactly what happened when President Trump walked in that Texas FOB, which is a forward operating base. You don't at ease a former commander. You don't at ease a former president. You don't salute a former president, especially if they weren't a veteran, but even then, veterans don't walk around saluting each other. All right? We can salute the flag. We can present arms at a flag being a veteran. We can do that. We typically don't, because when we're not in uniform, it kind of looks kind of awkward when you're in a crowd and you're standing there saluting a flag. Now, people probably might get by your proper hand gesture that, you might be a veteran, but we typically don't. But we can, as veterans, salute a flag anywhere, in or out of uniform. But if you're in uniform, you better be in the military, all right, and you better salute the flag. So, little things like that. So the Adjutant General gave that whole thing away. So then you go to California. You go to California just recently, but that's a visual with President Trump in place, but it amped up because he used the National Guard, and then he used what? Active duty. Well, active duty took it to a whole other level. Now, the Supreme Court had already ruled he could use the 1798 Aliens Act, which that alone should anyone who had any questions at that point, that should have squashed it. That's a wartime order. All right. But wartime orders were already in place. So you shouldn't have had any questions, but when they ruled that, that should have put the stamp right there on Derek Jonhson, Rattletrap 1776, the Midnight Rider Rides Again, everything. That should have put the stamp of approval on everything, because that's your big boy order. That was when the Supreme Court clarified what President Trump's doing is not unlawful. And then your joint publication 3-57, Army joint publication 3-57, page 46. It tells you that no, generally you don't want Title 10 Department of Defense forces on the streets with military civil operations. Unless what? It says unless Congress deems so or the Constitution. Well, that's what Title 50, Chapter 33, Section 1550 is. That Section 1550, it tells you in the War Powers Act, it tells you in the codification down there, it says it's temporary. It don't say it like that, but it words it. When you read it, it's saying this was in the NDAA, the Defense Authorization Act, which is your defense budget of 2020. It's saying it's for this operation. It's a specific operation. This is why it pays, ladies and gentlemen, to read what I give you. What I give you is repetitive for a reason. Title 50, Chapter 33, Section 1550. Now you should want to go read Title 50, the whole thing, Chapter 33, the whole thing, and then you'll get to Section 1550. But when you put your basis on the laws and the orders of what President Trump's using, that's your foundation. And then you'll be able to see all these things. And then you'll understand the National Guard. Go read about the National Guard. Go read about Title 10 versus Title 32. Even a Title 32 order that's federally funded doesn't remove the president. That's even better, actually, because of things like this. But Title 10 means it puts them in active duty status. Now, there's some Title 10s and Title 32s that can't be found, which means they have to be in a Presidential Emergency Action Document, which is a special, unique power by the President, which is already acknowledged, and we're going to go over that in a minute again. But Texas was the biggie. They showed you the President, and then he told you on World TV, he told you twice it's a military operation. You have a war, invasion, and military operation. The invasion term he has mentioned over and over and over again. He has mentioned invasion. Well, that ties into your Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2 of the United States Constitution, which is the suspension clause. The suspension of the writ of habeas corpus, which they call it the suspension clause. They call it also slang for suspending the Constitution. Well, it doesn't suspend the whole Constitution. It just means that when there's an invasion, the president can do certain things to shut down certain things with his power as a chief executive officer of the executive branch, which is Article 2. Very key. Everything the president does has to be under Article 2. So if there's a writ of habeas corpus, guess who had to suspend that? Congress. Because that's Article 1, which is your legislative branch. That's why people are struggling with this, because the foundation ain't there. All right? So now you have your New York 2022, 2023, and 2024 National Guard out. Executive Order 28 by Governor Hochul says federal support, which requires president. There's nothing there for quote-unquote Joe, so therefore you got to go back to your wartime powers, which had already been invoked by President Donald John Trump. That's why this matters. So if you want to put that last, that proves those, and then flip that back around on the front, that there had to be a wartime order in place for there not to be a Title 10 or 32 order by quote-unquote Joe. You would be able to see full proof all over Google when you typed in, where's the Title 10 or Title 32 order by quote-unquote Joe. It wouldn't be a headline that reads it, and then inside the headline it tells you that the Secretary of Defense did it, because the Secretary of Defense already has an order by whom? President Donald John Trump, which is a wartime order that made them equal in an executive order. So the wartime orders were already there, and the Secretary of Defense's orders were already put into place long before 2021 to 2025. That's why this stuff is fun. Then you have 2018, 2020, 2022, 2024, National Guard were called out to the elections, the polls. All right. The only Title 32 order in place for that is back in 2018. Now, there's no Title 10 order there. And if there was or is one, it's in a PED somewhere. But guess what the Title 32 order is from? Mattis. They called him Mad Dog Mattis from 2018. Well, this ties everything in. One, National Guard cannot be, well, period. No soldier can be in uniform at the elections and polls unless they're on official duty. Ladies and gentlemen, if a soldier is at a regular poll on election day in uniform and they're not on official duty, that is a violation of federal law. That's Title 18, Section 592. And let me tell you for a moment when we tie this in, if you think that the National Guard were at the polls from 2018 to 2020 with President Donald John Trump being the visual president at that time, and there wasn't a Title 10 or Title 32 order in place, if you think that the libtards hadn't lost their mind over that, which they haven't, it ain't even been a mention because this is an operation. All your mainstream media are under 47 U.S. Code Section 606, which is also a wartime order, which is titled that. When you go look that up, it's actually titled War Powers of the President. If you think that President Trump violated anything remotely close with overusing the military, they would have been raising sand back then about that. And those movements and that Title 32 by Mattis in place proves this. Why would, quote-unquote, Joe Biden put the National Guard at the polls in 2022 and 2024? There's National Guard articles on .mil sites and all over the internet that proves the National Guard for the first time in history have been at the 2018, 2020, 2022, 2024 elections. Nowhere before that. So that would have to be either a joint operation by President Trump and quote-unquote Joe, for the people that thinks Joe Biden was real, or wartime orders do exactly what wartime orders do. And there's enough wartime orders in place, even without all the ones that are in presidential emergency action documents, to prove that it's not a joint operation by quote-unquote Joe, especially with what all's coming out with the Hunter Biden report, the laptop. This thing, 636 pages, which we're going to go over in a minute again. Then you'd have to say why, quote-unquote, Joe doesn't have a Title 10 or Title 32 order in place for the National Guard in 2022 and 2024. So see, that one little thing alone proves the whole operation. There are so many little things that where one proves the whole thing, and then they all prove the whole thing. And you shouldn't need a military veteran to have to give you quote-unquote proof. No one should have a problem with the president and the military taking over this nation lawfully, not a coup, but lawfully. It would be called a coup to the liberals because they don't know what military laws are, and they don't respect them, and they don't respect the military. They'd call it a coup. But it's a lawful takeover. And they're taking out everybody. It's all public, too, on top of it. Everything I talk about is public laws and orders. There's nothing secretive. So that one little aspect, President Trump and Mattis have a Title 32 for the National Guard at the polls in 2018 and 2020, but quote-unquote Joe has no Title 32 for 2022 and 2024 elections. And the National Guard were at those the same way. Same capacity, same official capacity, same official duty. Then you have your national emergencies and your PEDs. So PEDs are your Presidential Emergency Action Documents. PEDs accompany a continuity government. They were established by President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who's a former 5-star general. All right. Well, those accompany and conjoin with each other. You can't have one without the other. Well, we have proof that there's a continuity of government invoked with Executive Order 13961, December the 7th, 2020. It has a partial revocation on January the 19th, 2025, which will be the last full 24-hour day of a presidency. So why would quote-unquote Joe let a continuity government run from January the 20th, 2021 all the way to the last full 24-hour day of a presidency in 2025, the day before President Trump took office for the third time, visually for a second time, but third time for people who know wartime orders, wartime laws? Why would he let a continuity government run if there wasn't a continuity government? And then also, you can't revoke something that hasn't been invoked. So a revocation means there was an invocation. And now all of a sudden we have senators, President Trump nominated senators who he still highly regards and talks about, one of those being from Utah, Mike Lee. They're putting up these amendments to amend national emergencies to report to where they're not for 2 years as prescribed by 1976, but it says in there that they want it 30 days. Meaning when a national emergency is declared, there's 30 days to do what? Solve that. And if not, it automatically terminates after 30 days if there's no joint resolution by the President and the Congress. Why all of a sudden are national emergencies prevalent? Oh, perhaps because the oldest one that was in place was 1979 by Jimmy Carter, which was a national emergency by Carter with whom? Iran. The deep state bureaucrats had no intentions of terminating any of these national emergencies that they declared in executive orders. They abused their powers, not President Trump. What President Trump's doing is taking the law as prescribed, the national emergencies as prescribed, use those to destroy the deep state, destroy all the deep state trafficking, opioids, pharmaceuticals, the currencies, etc., reset everything, and then also solve all their national emergencies, as he just posted today, August the 17th, 2025. The media should be reporting how I've solved 6 wars all of a sudden. But see, there are wars that the media didn't tell you about. So that's why people don't care, is because you haven't been told to care. You haven't been told to get riled up. The normies hadn't been told. You didn't know about the Congo. You didn't know about India. You didn't know about some of these places, Syria. You didn't know about a lot of these places because you haven't been told. But guess where they are? Executive orders with national emergencies. And President Trump ended the first one, Syria, and now we're in open market free trade with Syria. So see, that's why trade deals matter. They're not just trade. It's something that if you're not business minded that you can't know about. They attach to all these national emergencies that the bureaucrats of the swamp, Obama, Bush, Clinton, Reagan, all the way back, even President Reagan. President Trump's been delicate with it, but even Reagan had swamps surrounding him. You got to call a spade a spade. It is what it is. So now the national emergencies are being addressed, and also, guess what's being addressed by these same senators for an amendment? Presidential Emergency Action Documents. I'm the first person who brought PEDS to all the platforms out there because no one had ever heard of them. You know why no one had ever heard of them? Because they're attached to military. They're attached to wartime powers. That requires who to talk about? Not only military, but military personnel who know they exist. There's 4 ways the military pairs with federal. Executive orders, national emergencies, proclamations, treaties. You know what the 4 components of a presidential emergency action document are? Executive orders, national emergencies, proclamations, treaties. And now we have those same senators trying to make an amendment to what? how PEDs are reported to whom? Congress. Because they're not reported to Congress. PEDs are draft classified. You know the only people who know about them? The President, the FBI, and the DOJ. And now they're trying to make an amendment to that to where those PEDs, if there's a PED in place, it has to be reported to the Congress, which is exposing all the past before President Trump. None of this has to do with President Trump. What President Trump and the military generals and the military and the world leaders and the leaders have been doing is cleaning out everything that the swamp had done and resetting it on the actual foundation of which they should have been set on. That way you have more transparency, you have more honesty, you have more integrity. But through those you also have what? More eyes on, and if everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing by accountability, responsibility, duties, transparency, honesty, and integrity, then when there's a loophole, guess how many people will catch it? More people will catch it versus what the swamp did all these years. They built their rhetorics and their games and their narratives, and they try to pin all of us Americans against each other. That's why you have a guy like me who's a retired veteran getting attacked by a few people out there, which I expect and I laugh about, but for your sake, you're the ones being confused, some of you. And I'm trying to say, hey, it's all laws and orders. It's all public laws and orders. And if you want a good, cleaned out country, if you want a good, cleaned out government, small government, it don't need to be big as it was, but small. But then local and state government, if you want it cleaned out, this is what we're doing. Now let's move over to Russiagate. So all that, the troop movement is one thing. That's more of like your optics, but also your visuals. That's your visual enforcements. And it also clarifies, and it validates, and it verifies, and whatever other term you need. It shows you this is a wartime special and strategic operation. Therefore, you need military personnel to know what's going on. But like I say all the time, my grandfather will be gone next month. In 1 month, my grandfather will be gone 20 years. He served from 43 to 45 in the Army during the most important but most popular puppet state, puppet government, which had two different quote-unquote presidents, a real one and a fake one. Every man that's qualified to talk about a puppet government and a government in exile, which is unconventional warfare and irregular warfare, they're all in the ground. They're all in memorial graves. The ones that are alive would be anywhere from 97 to 105 or 110 years old, and the odds that they would be able to articulate that and deliver that to you wouldn't be there. So people like me who listened to my grandfather, who was Army, and then I go follow his footsteps and go in the Army, and I listened to him growing up, I took all that in. And not just him, all of his buddies, all of my great-uncles. My great-uncle who was a Purple Heart at Normandy, stormed the beaches of Normandy. He was shot like 5 times and stabbed like 3. We never got the exact number. He didn't talk about it much, but he earned a Purple Heart that day. Should have had 8 of them, but that ain't how it works. So that's why you know there's not a lot of veterans out there that do know what's going on, because it requires extensive knowledge, extensive reading, extensive studying, extensive comprehension of what you read and study, and then being able to articulate it and then deliver it. So there's not many. No, and I hate that for everybody. But just because there's not many doesn't mean anything. So Russiagate is the next tie-in. So you've seen all the declassification, you've seen all the DNI, you've seen Tulsi Gabbard and all the layout of Russiagate, Putin, President Trump, all that, the Steele dossier that was fake. We all knew that. If you're a patriot, you knew that. The dossier, you see Clapper, Brennan, Comey, all these names resurfacing back to the forefront, but especially Obama and Hillary. All right, and then you have where it says in here that, and I'm going to just read a little quick excerpt from the DNI report, but it says, in contrast to the rest of the ICA, the judgment that Putin developed the, quote, a clear preference, end quote, for candidate Trump, and, quote, aspired to help his chances of victory, end quote, did not adhere to the tenets of the ICD. So they told you right there. Now, what liberals are going to do is what they always do. They're going to say, well, you guys have had 5 years to build all this narrative, to build this stuff, and to cut stuff out and delete stuff here. And all. That exactly what they do. You know, when you're accused of something, out of the blue, it's mainly because it's someone accusing you is exactly what they've done. So see, that's what they would say, but they don't matter. They don't matter. What matters is what we have, who we are, and what we know. That's what matters. And what we know and who we are and what's going on, they're never going to ever be in a position again of power. Because once things are exposed to every normal person, once taxes are all relieved and cut, once you see the money rolling in, once everything is out of this kind of smoky environment and over there in the clear where every single person who has a brain can see it, once everybody sees it, guess what they're not going to want to do? Go back to the old. Because President Donald John Trump, even though it's a wartime operation, but for the people that don't know that, for the people who just thinks he's a regular president in a normal presidency, once people see that that man went in there and did everything that the swamp said couldn't happen all those years, depending on how old you are, once you see something that was told was impossible, then you become what? A believer. Because when it becomes possible, you become a what? A believer. That's what belief is about. Faith is not about that. Faith is faith in things unseen. Belief is things that you have already seen that you can believe. That's why I bring you all the receipts. That's why people who are patriots, when we see people comment in the comment box, we can tell if you've read, studied, or comprehended. We can also tell if you're struggling or if you're being, a moron. I won't use other words today. Try not to. So let's do the Russia-Ukraine breakdown one more time. So you got to know this. One, Ukraine was not a member of NATO. That's the first thing straight out the gate. NATO has its own constitution. That's why it looks stupid for quote-unquote Joe and Kamala to be talking about NATO and the Constitution, because in Article 5 of the NATO Constitution, it says an attack on one member is an attack on all. All right? So that was your first straight out the gate to say, hey, don't get mad, don't get riled up, we ain't sending any money there, none of that's what you're seeing. This is a special operation. Here's what you need to know. All the way back to 2004, you can get on Google, you can just be a Googler for this, you don't even have to have any expertise, you can get on Google, and you can look up the article and see in 2004 that the United States Department of Defense was funding biolabs in Ukraine. Biological labs. Biological weapons labs. Biological, meaning chemical. Now fast forward. Those who have been watching me, you know good and well that I've eliminated Putin for one reason. From 2008 to 2012, Putin was not president. He was prime minister, but he wasn't president. President Trump has recently tweeted about the former president who was the president from 2008 to 2012. President Trump has recently truthed that he needs to stand down and watch his language because he thinks he's still president. That's very key, because what happened in 2010? Uranium One took place. It was Putin smiling with Hillary in the photo during that time period. But he wasn't president. He was prime minister. So which would mean he would have reason to do what? Hey, I wasn't the president. I didn't call that shot. I was a prime minister. Yes, I saw it. Yes, I know what happened. But I wasn't president. And I will work with you. Oh, that's what 99.999% of the liberals are missing. That's also what Republicans and conservatives who aren't patriots, who don't know about laws and orders, but also tactics and strategies, that's what they're missing. Uranium One is what President Trump called the greatest scandal in United States history. It's where Hillary and the Clinton Foundation, Bill was getting paid $500,000 to speak. And then it was a $145 million deal. Who was the president in 2010 again? Barack Hussein Obama, as President Trump likes to call him, which is factual and truthful, because he's a traitor and an enemy to this nation. And he wasn't the only one. 2010, key. Who was the Secretary of State from 2009 to 2013? Hillary? Man. So then you fast forward to 2014. She wasn't Secretary of State, but moved to 2014. What took place in 2014? Well, you had Biden made 7 trips in 7 months on your taxpayer dollar to Ukraine. Obama had 4 executive orders in the year of 2014 alone with Ukraine. 3 of those alone in the month of March. 3 executive orders for Ukraine in March that declared a national emergency for an unusual and extraordinary threat in Ukraine. Now let's break that down really quick. What do you know what an executive order means when you declare a national emergency, an executive order for a country? That means that there's something in that country that's a problem. That's not an executive order saying, hey, we're your partner. Hey, we're your friend. Hey, we're going to work with you on this. No. See, if you go back, look, why did President Trump just bomb Iran? Nuclear facilities? What was in place since 1979? Executive order with a national emergency by Iran? Every executive order that's been declared from 1979 to 2016 that was left open, we've had troops in those nations. Some of those they hadn't even made known to the public yet, because they didn't tell you about it yet. It wasn't a concern yet. They didn't get to fulfill all of their dirty tactics in their little dirty wars because the military stepped in, the general stepped in, the commander, the new sheriff stepped in. All right, so why would Obama declare 4 executive orders with a national emergency, 3 in the month of March alone, in 2014, the same year that Joe Biden made 7 trips in 7 months, the same year that it was reported that Biden, Hunter Biden, Pelosi's kid, John Kerry's kid, and Mitt Romney's kid are working in Ukraine, making that big dollars, big money, $50, $100, $200, $300,000 a month money. All right. And then they only have 1 election of the 2 rounds. So it's 1 of 2 rounds called a snap election, only 1. That's the one where Obama called and congratulated 3 days later. And they said, we can now work together. Now we got it. All right. Poroshenko was the president of Ukraine, not Zelensky. All right. And then also in 2014, the big one that just ties in with Melania and Hunter. $1 billion. Victoria Nuland was working for Obama and Biden administration. Victoria Nuland secured $1 billion in defense for Ukraine. But she also was turned around and caught on tape, verified by the government, verified by their government, that she said F-U-C-K to the European Union. F the EU. F them. Didn't President Trump just make a giant trade deal with the European Union? Then you fast forward to 2018. 2018, Ukraine breaks a treaty with Russia, a Commonwealth treaty, because Ukraine was never fully independent on their own. You got to know the history of the Soviet Union. And why were a bunch of bureaucrats busting up the Soviet Union? Conquer, divide. Conquer, divide. You heard, quote-unquote, Biden on the debate mention another country. He mentioned Belarus, who's not a NATO member. So you got to know these things where you can listen and hear those things. Ukraine, Belarus, they're not members of NATO. He was saying our concern for Ukraine and Belarus and all these other. Why are you concerned about nations who are not a part of NATO? So see, they were showing you none of this is real. So when you revert back to 2018, not only in 2018 did Ukraine break a treaty with Russia, but we broke a treaty with Russia called the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Range Treaty. When you read and study it, I won't break it all down, but when you read and study it, it ends up to what they call a MAD doctrine, which is a Nash equilibrium. And even though it sounds like breaking a treaty is a bad thing, it's actually not. A MAD doctrine is actually where you establish peace. You got to know these things. All right, so 2018. Also in 2018, July the 16th, 2018, President Donald John Trump and Putin meet in Helsinki, Finland. Soccer ball. A soccer ball was handed to President Trump by Vladimir Putin. Now, what are the odds that they showed you that the Ukraine war started in late February 2022, but the actual war started in late February 27th, 2014. All you got to do is go look it up. Google, everything has it for you. February 2014, but they're telling all the new people, the lost sheep of this planet, but especially the U.S., that the war started in February 2022. So what are the odds that it was February 2014 and now February 2022? But then shortly after that, guess who was under congressional oath? Victoria Nuland. In 2022, Victoria Nuland is the undersecretary for quote-unquote Joe. You see how they pulled all these people from way back here and put them up here with quote-unquote Joe? For a reason. This is all a reenactment. Victoria Nuland's under congressional oath. Marco Rubio asked her, are there bioweapon labs in Ukraine? After all of 2021, liberals, Democrats, quote-unquote Joe, quote-unquote Kamala, quote-unquote all the actors and actresses, they told the American people, no, it's a conspiracy theory. There's no biolabs over there. That's a conspiracy grab by the Republicans, by the conservatives, da-da-da-da. All throughout 2021 and early 2022. That's all you heard. Until Victoria Nuland, the key component of 2014, is under congressional oath in 2022. And what does she say? Yes, there are. But we were afraid the Russians were going to get them. Now, Tulsi Gabbard, the next week, was being called a conspiracy theorist and a liar. That's why I hate the word liar. You can be 100% wrong and not be a liar. But when you absolutely blatantly lie about something, that's what Mitt Romney was doing, and that's what the Democrats were doing. I put quotations because this is not all in real time. But that week after Victoria Nuland admitted what they all said was a conspiracy theory, what they all said was a lie, what they all said was a money grab and a grab, political grab, Victoria Nuland, under oath, says yes. The next week, Tulsi Gabbard was putting up more evidence for people. And what did Mitt Romney say? Mitt Romney called her a conspiracy theorist and a liar. You see, it ain't just Democrats and liberals. Mitt Romney, not a good dude. All right? Now, 2022. Guess who did not play in the World Cup of Soccer? Now, I'm cowboy through and through. I've lived in 9 states, coast to coast. But there's one thing I can never get rid of, my roots. And my roots stem back to my great-grandfather and my grandfather. My great-grandfather would have been born in the 1880s. All right, this particular one. And he was an Alabama Crimson Tide football fan from day one. Now, day one for him would have been back during radio days and newspaper days. Back when they didn't have TV to watch a football game. That's how I became an Alabama football fan, because my great-grandfather passed it to my grandfather passed it to my dad. All right, my dad will be 83 years old next month. He tells people all the time, I've forgotten more football than you know. But this would be like the Alabama Crimson Tide having a 14-0 team or 15-0 team and not being able to play in the national championship. For no reason, no probation, no cheating, no scandals, just, hey, your boys have got to fight in a war because something that happened way back here. So, out of all those things from the Soviet Union, bring down that wall, Mr. Gorbachev. Remember all that? From 89 all the way to 2004 to 2014 to 2018 to 2022, and a new war declared, and then Victoria Nuland confirming everything, Mitt Romney showing his colors, Tulsi Gabbard flipping and coming to the good side, but she's special operations, so she's always been in the know. Tip of the spear, baby. All right. So all of those, fast forward, and guess who couldn't play in the World Cup of Soccer in 2022 of all years? Here you go, Mr. President Trump. The soccer ball, here you go. The ball is in your court, sir. What would you like for us to do? Well, Mr. Putin, see, you were a prime minister. You weren't president. But because you're a prime minister, you know about Uranium One. You know about Barack Hussein Obama. You know about Hillary Rodham Clinton. You know about Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. You know about the whole thing back here. And what we're going to need you to do is we're not going to start a foreign war because that's the one thing that separates my presidency from all in history. You're going into Ukraine, and you're going to demolish all those biochemical labs that they were going to use for genocide against the world. That's what you're going to do. And we will support you in ways that we can. And when the truth comes out, we'll all be exonerated and vindicated. And those who deserve punishment are going to receive punishment. That is why liberals look idiots. They're dumb, lazy, stupid, incompetent, and most of them are enemies to this nation. And if I were the commander-in-chief, they wouldn't even have a moment of forgiveness, and I didn't know. They would all be deported to Tasmania. They would have Rosie O'Donnell as their leader, and I would never hear from them again. But because our leaders have more compassion than I do, and I'm not the leader, God didn't put me at that place in this time in history, they'll get a chance to hit their knees and be able to ask forgiveness for all the things that they've done to slander and defame a man that they know nothing about, and they're all drama and propaganda fed. So now the DNI, what's cool about the DNI, this is like a little cherry on top. All these DNI reports by Gabbard and the DOJ, etc., FBI, everything has been cleaned out. All these reports show that Obama called in a National Security Council meeting. You know why that's important, ladies and gentlemen, especially you patriots? Because another thing, one of those little things that proves that this is a wartime operation, special operation, strategic operation, every president has had an order of succession within every military domain except for whom? Quote unquote Joe. And one of those military domains is national security strategy. The most recent and last national security strategy on the Department of Defense is from 2017. It's Executive Order 13963, which was 2 executive orders after Executive Order 13961 that invoked the continuity of government, that quote-unquote Joe. The last thing that people see that think Joe Biden was real, the last thing on his executive orders, out of all of what people thought was his quote-unquote presidency, the last thing is the revocation of Executive Order 13961, the partial revocation. The last thing you see when you click on executive orders for 2021. Boop, partial revocation. And the invocation came December the 7th, 2020. And then 3 days later, Executive Order 13963, which is the last order of succession within the Department of Defense. Quote unquote Joe don't have an order of succession with the DOD or the National Security. And here's Obama having a National Security Council meeting way back in 2016 when President Trump won and they were trying to flip all this because they knew they had been had. Come on, folks. And then also, I can't stop with the cherry and the smile and the grin. So that's one. So hang tight. Keep the same inner energy up. There's a new executive order President Trump just put into place a few days ago. It's about Russia, the Russia Federation. What's all in there? The National Security Council. And guess what it is? It's got 2 executive orders in there by quote-unquote Joe. So by looking at it, if you didn't know what I know, but if you knew laws and orders like executive orders and national emergencies and things like that, if you knew that but you didn't know the full picture, looking at it, you'd think that President Trump is continuing those executive orders by quote-unquote Joe. But when you read the whole thing, it talks about the National Security Council. And when you know that quote-unquote Joe didn't even have an order of succession, well, if people thought Joe was real, if Joe would have died, if he was real and he'd have died in office, guess what would have happened? Then all those order of successions he didn't have, well, the orders of successions that were in place, the last order of successions, those orders would be following the orders of whom? The last president on file, on record. And as redundant as it sounds, every president does change over. They sign the same order of succession. The order of succession, who they are and the titles don't change, all right? But they do it where they'll have their name on file and on record. And if they did die or something happened. So this new executive order that President Trump just put out, by looking at it, and if you didn't know that, you would think he's continuing those orders by quote-unquote Joe. But then you see the other language in there that talks about the National Security Council, and President Trump's the only one with National Security Strategy Order of Successions 2021 before it, and then 2021 or 2025 after it. So before 2021, over in 2017, matter of fact, it was January 28th. So it was 8 days after he took the famous oath with the troops coming down behind him. So it was 8 days, so it was 2017, and then the other one's February the 4th, I believe, 2025. Can't make it up. The other thing is what set this up. What set all this up was the executive orders and the unique laws and orders from 2017 to 2021. That's where your meat are. That's where you got to know your foundation. Because it makes no sense that quote-unquote Joe would continue all these executive orders. There's 8 executive orders with 8 national emergencies that quote-unquote Joe continued. Deporting the migrants, taking back the Panama Canal, funding Doge. It makes no sense whatsoever why all those things would be in there. Election interference. It makes no sense why quote-unquote Joe would do that. Busting the people funding the Chinese communists. Guess who's in this bad boy for funding the Chinese? Quote-unquote Joe. So why would he continue an executive order with a national emergency that froze the assets of those? So it would be Joe freezing his own assets and freezing his own son and freezing his own buddies. People say, I don't see any proof. You don't have any brains. That's why the Wizard of Oz had a character in there that didn't have any brains. That's you. If you ain't seen no proof by now, it's because you ain't read and studied everything I've given you. Because there's plenty of proof, and I wouldn't have the followers I have if I did. So 2021, so 2017 to 2021, all those laws and orders in there set this up. That's your Title 50, Chapter 33, Section 1550, which is it's out of the NDAA. So it's an operation. And it tells you that in Section 1550, that the codification says this is not an amendment to the War Powers Act. It's a temporary amendment because it has to be recorded there because it's a wartime order at the moment. But it's going to go away, meaning it's a strategic and special operation that needed to be placed in the War Powers Act for record's sake and accountability's sake. But when this operation's over, it's not going to be in the War Powers Act where other presidents can utilize it. That's what that's saying. Also in the bottom of 1550, executive document. You've heard me break it down. That executive document is from July the 19th, 2021, and it's by visuals. If people didn't know what I know, or if you know what I know, it doesn't matter. It reads the same way. It is, quote-unquote, Joe relinquishing his authority and power as a president and commander-in-chief, that's what it's reading, to the whom? Secretary of Defense. The what? The functions and powers vested in what? Clause 1550, Section 1550, which is from the what? NDA 8 of 2020. That's what that executive document does in the bottom of Title 50, Chapter 33, Section 1550. That is, quote-unquote, Joe relinquishing his authority and power of the functions and authorities vested in the President of Section 1550 to the Secretary of Defense. Well, that's when you got to understand orders of succession. Until the President dies, nowhere remotely close with the Secretary of Defense being in power. All right, so then you go to wartime powers. Well, then you have your what? Invocation of your continuity government in Executive Order 13961, which will be in the second 180 days of that clause 1550. So in that 1550, it gives you a clause and it gives a command. It says in the first 180 days after December 20, 2019, the President will report to the Congress, and then it says in every 180 days thereafter. Well, that order has not been terminated. All the orders under it have not been terminated. All the orders under that's when the 1 million reserve components were federalized to active duty. All those. Your Southern Command and the launching of the drug bust, all your drug trafficking, the Southern Command on April the 1st and the 22 joint partners, to this day they're still operating, and they're not sending all that stuff back to Colombia like they used to do. All right, all this stuff. So that one executive document, if you want to believe that quote-unquote Joe is real, if you just want to hang on that, fine. But that executive document shows that he gave up his authority. That's exactly what that is. And it says to the President of Section 1550. The President of 1550 is Donald John Trump. And every other, and there ain't many of them, but any other time a president has given an order to the Secretary of State, it wasn't to the defense, it was to the state. Obama gave a memorandum like that to the Secretary of State, which would be Hillary, his other thief, his other crook, the authority of an order that he had made, not Bush. All right. So now let's move on to Hunter. The new interviews by Hunter. He's had two, July 21st, and August the 5th. This July and this August. They confirmed this book right here. They confirmed the contents of this, 636 pages. They confirmed Rudy Giuliani receiving a copy after the FBI. All right? They confirmed everything. This ties Obama, Bill, Hillary, Joe, Hunter, all of them. The trafficking, sex trafficking. I mean, you can just read the titles in here. The titles alone show you. All right? Motive, timeline, the four families, subpoena, suspicious activity, China, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Romania, Mexico, Serbia, Libya, prostitution, human trafficking, non-consensual pornography in the family and outside the family, distribution and possession of drugs, other narcotics-related crimes. Everything's in here. I don't recommend it being around children. They do blot out the images, but I don't recommend it. But it has all the emails, text messages, everything. Venmo, checks, reports, everything. Got it all. Everything. Text messages, everything. They got everything. Hunter put all that on his computer for whatever dumb reason. He brought down the castle. So the two interviews then confirmed that. They confirmed the links to all that, which confirms this book. So these new interviews are not real time. Because guess what just happened 3 days ago? There's a new interview. So it's the same guy, the same host, sitting with quote-unquote Hunter. All right? And he asked Hunter, does he want to apologize to Melania for the remarks he made? And he says, F no. F-U-C-K no. Well, Melania has been given the green light by President Trump to go after Hunter for $1 billion? Oh, at $1 billion, where does $1 billion strike it? What would $1 billion have to do with defamation? I mean, look, let's just be real. If this was real in real time, but defamation wouldn't hold a $1 billion price tag whatsoever. It wouldn't hold a $1 billion. It would hold something like your 401k or whatever it is that you have, because you can't get something if the person doesn't have anything in the first place. That's why some people out there talking, like the Space Force dude who tried to steal my federal trademark and all that, they don't have anything. And it's not about the money anyway. So see, it's like defamation and slander is just about setting the record straight that you're defaming and slandering because you're the criminal. You're the crook. You're the one doing the wrong things. You're the one doing that. When someone accuses you of something, or they try to bring up something from the past, like text messages like 30 years ago, 15 years ago, stuff they can't prove, because phone records don't even go that far back. I think it's 1 to 7 years. So when they try to say, oh, President Trump pinned me up in the hallway 40 years ago and tried to kiss me, why didn't you say something then? So all these people who try to bring up inappropriate messages and all this other bull crap way back yonder, that's the deep state. That's the oldest trick in the book way back when. Same thing about Epstein, all this stuff. Everybody wanted a photo with Epstein. Everybody wanted a photo with President Trump in the 90s. So see, what people are not doing is looking at the evidence, because you don't have the evidence yet, because you're not ready for the evidence. They're not ready for you to have it. They're setting the stage because that's one little sliver of the pie. That's not the big thing. It's big because it was trafficking, but it conjoins with all this. $1 billion is a big price tag. And it just so happens to be that Hunter is connected with Papa Joe, the big guy that they got text message proof in. The big guy. They got the text messages right in here, the big guy. He knew everything. He knew what was going on. $1 billion. And then, what does Hunter do in this new interview 3 days ago, which would have been the 14th? He says, well, I mainly get all my information from Michael Wolff. Oh, well, Michael Wolff is the one that let, who let him in the White House? Oh, Sloppy Steve Bannon, that President Trump has hammered and gave him nickname Sloppy Steve, who was a lieutenant in the Navy in the 70s, who President Trump on CBS and all of them said Steve had nothing to do with my presidency, nothing to do with my historic win. He said he's finding out in the real world that the real world isn't for him. He was too busy trying to write phony books. Phony books. Now you know why one of his people have been attacking me the last 2 and 3 years. Now you know why he recently tried to talk about the third term as if that's new, because I already have a book about it. See, what's happening is the good is exposing the evil. The light is exposing the darkness. I already have the books out talking about the third term. So see, all these people are coming to the surface. Look how many Republicans and conservatives still follow Steve Bannon. And here's Hunter in the new interview just 3 days ago saying he gets all his information from Michael Wolff, who wrote all these phony books that President Trump has hammered over and over and over again, multiple times, for about 10 or 11 years now, and recently hammered him again this year already. Look at the linkages. This ain't just Democrat, liberal, ladies and gentlemen. The worst ones are the ones that look like you, talk like you, and act like you. That's why you got to have skill sets like no other. And really, you don't even need like skills. You need a foundation of laws and orders and principles that are solutions for good people, decent people. And that's what also keeps you from being confused and saying, I don't know who to believe and I don't know who to trust anymore. It's because you don't have a foundation in laws and orders. Because everything that President Donald John Trump and the military have done, the world leaders and leaders, it reflects humanity. It reflects the foundation of this nation. Not one single loophole goes against it. Not one single place. So this right here, and the new quote-unquote Biden interviews, Hunter, guess what it's going to do? It's leading to Supreme Court docket 23-939 that I've broken down, filed March the 19th, 2024. Now you've seen Letitia James and all this stuff up there in New York. You've seen all these tie into Hezbollah and Iran and President Trump. You saw all the people out there in the mainstream media, even though they're playing a role too, so, a lot of them. They tied in how Iran was a part of the quote-unquote assassinations. You had people calling that a conspiracy theory and all this other stuff, and the liberals said it was a setup. They don't even know anything about special operations. I broke down the quote-unquote assassination attempt on July 13th last year, which is all special operations. I've broken that down, but it's neither here nor it is and it ain't. It's not important for this one. But 4 months before that, Supreme Court docket 23-939, it asks a very important question there. It says, can a president order SEAL Team 6 to commit assassination on a political rival? The only time SEAL Team 6 and a president has been involved with anything that you've seen with world leaders was Obama and Osama bin Laden. Well, if you go over to the War Powers Resolution on Wikipedia, certain pages, certain ones you click on, there's a certain article there that shows that military and federal lawyers said Obama violated the Constitution and the War Powers Act because of one thing, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But in that Supreme Court docket 23-939 that you can look up, go to Google, type in Supreme Court docket search, enter, find a little box, type in Donald J. Trump, but really put in, you just back that out, put 23 dash, the dash matters, 939, enter. You'll find it. You'll scroll down to March 19th. It says 3 amici curiae because there's a bunch of petitions inside that 23-939. You got to scroll all the way down and find the one that says 3 amici curiae. All right? Click on that. Then it'll pull it up. Well, after it asks that question, it says combat generals, plural, and senior level officials, plural. So officials, plural, and generals, plural, says a resounding no. Then it tells you in the bottom of that paragraph, it specifically says, any military officer who carried out such an order committed murder. Well, they can't get Bush for murdering Hussein because Bush has an entry in the War Powers Resolution Act. Even as corrupt as it was, they can't get him. But they can get Obama because that's the one thing that these military and federal lawyers have documented. Obama does not have an entry of any kind in the War Powers Resolution Act. So see why Bannon's people look stupid for coming after me, saying that Title 50, Chapter 33 is not the War Powers Resolution Act? It most certainly is. That's how stupid and incompetent they are. It most certainly is the War Powers Resolution Act. And guess who don't have a name in there or any kind of entry? Obama. So why would they be trying to cover that up? Why would they be fighting so hard over a retired veteran who's keeping oath versus a treason piece of trash former lieutenant of the Navy who led in Michael Wolff to the White House to interview all these staffers who already had a book that President Trump had already denounced, had already had to fight, and then he writes 2 more books that President Trump has had to fight against. Explain that. And explain why Obama doesn't have an entry in the War Powers Resolution Act and why military and federal lawyers have noted that. And now explain why Supreme Court Docket 23-939 ties in Obama to Osama, and guess who else? Gaddafi. Because in 2011, guess what Gaddafi said at the Nations? What did he say? He said, the same 5 world powers cannot rule us. Are we not going to investigate what happened to Hussein? Hussein and Cheney were friends until they did what? Until they, the old United States, the swamp, until they did what? Until they killed him. That's exactly what Gaddafi said right in front of everybody. And guess who laughed at him? Assad from Syria, who fled December the 8th, 2024. No one even celebrated that. He fled Syria December the 8th, 2024. Assad laughed at Gaddafi on that floor, delivering that speech, and then in the same year, October 2011, guess who died? Guess who was assassinated? 5 months after Osama bin Laden. Gaddafi. Who was under congressional oath saying, why does it matter? They're gone. Who was that again? That would be Hillary Rodham Clinton with Benghazi, Libya. And you don't think that President Trump didn't mean what he said when he said, we have it all, we've caught them all? You don't think that you're not going to see justice? You don't think that? You need to hang on a little longer. So if you need more proof, again, there's plenty of it. The order of successions, none of those by quote-unquote Joe. The last Department of Defense, the most recent and the last, or the last and most recent. However you want to split that hair, it's the same thing, but however you want to say it, it works both ways. The last Department of Defense is from 2020, December the 10th. Executive Order 13963, which was 2 executive orders after the invocation of continuity government, which conjoins with the Presidential Emergency Action Documents, which proves, again, why we don't have certain orders that we can show for quote-unquote Joe, but we have orders from President Trump. All right? The tariffs prove everything. President Trump put those tariffs into place in 2018. Tariffs are presidential authority. You can look that up. Trade Act of 62 and Trade Act of 74. And even though they're presidential, this is a cherry on top to add on to it, but all these liberals out there screaming the tariffs are being added to taxpayer dollars, and we're going to pay for it, and they're destroying the economy, and it's going to destroy the... Well, okay, let's go with that theory for a moment. If you're saying President Trump's tariffs are destroying those, and President Trump's tariffs are adding money, then why didn't quote-unquote Joe terminate one single tariff from 2021 to 2025? How come not one judge tried to block a tariff from 2021 to 2025? But boy, they can block the hell out of some Trump stuff. Then, because it don't matter, because they're still presidential, the point I was about to make, because it's not congressional, they're presidential, but just because they showed the American people that Joe Biden, a Democrat, was president. They showed the people that Kamala, obviously Democrat, because of the Biden. And they also showed that the House and the Senate had Democratic control. So there was a president, Democrat, House, Democrat, Senate, Democrat, and quote-unquote, Joe couldn't terminate one single thing by President Trump. Related to war orders, related to the troops, related to the military operation, the military occupation, the continuity of government. Then, of course, again, the most beautiful one is your January the 20th, 2021. Army regulations. Now, I have a ton of people who follow me. Gay, Buddhist, atheist, all kinds of straight, all kinds of this. I have every walk of life who follows me. Black, white, Hispanic, mixed, interracial, everything. So what I'm about to say, I've already been covered by all these different walks of life who follow me. But if you were the gayest gay of gayest gays, of atheists, of God-hating people, if you served honorably in the military and or you retired honorably, which you can't retire without being honorable, if you were the gayest of gayest gays, the atheists of God-hating God-haters, and you served honorably and honorably retired, guess what you get? You get a military funeral. So it ain't got a thing to do with who you are, what you do, and who you like, and who you kiss, and all that other stuff. It ain't got nothing to do with that. Whether pineapples go on pizza or not, it doesn't matter what you believe. Round earth, flat earth, this earth, that earth. It don't matter. Heaven, no heaven. Well, it don't matter. If you served honorably, you get a funeral. You know why that matters? It's because Army regulations don't care about those. Army don't care. Marine Corps don't care. Air Force don't care. Space Force don't care. Coast Guard don't care. Navy don't care. They don't care what you got in your mouth, what you got in your bedroom. They don't care. So anybody who has a problem and can't dissect that on January the 20th, 2021, the first time in U.S. history, you saw two different cannon sets in one day, on that day, was an optic to show you what you're about to see from 2021 to 2025 is a wartime military special strategic operation by military laws and federal where they pair. Because that day, one, quote-unquote Joe did not receive a traditional flight into D.C. on Air Force One. Now, if you're a Democrat or a liberal and you love you some Joe Biden, you should be raising hell that your babbling idiot who wasn't real, he was already a babbling idiot before the world thought he was quote-unquote president, who couldn't even, he couldn't even put a full sentence together. Go back and watch the Clarence Thomas trial and you'll find that out quick how dumb Joe Biden really is and was. All right, but you should be raising hell that your boy didn't get a traditional flight into D.C. on Air Force One. Even the treasonous murderer Obama got to ride in Air Force One to D.C. So if your boy sat in his basement in his whitey tighties eating his ice cream, even though his brain was already numb, all right, if you believe that that fool got 81 million votes and didn't get to ride into D.C. on Air Force One, you are a damn dumb fool. And if you're a Republican and a conservative and you got problems with this, guess what category you just jumped in? You and the liberals are in the swing, K-I-S-S-I-N-G. Remember that old little rhyme? Yeah, that's what y'all doing if you want to act like that. Not to mention, but to mention, he raised his right hand at 11:47 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is a violation of the 20th Amendment of the United States Constitution, which says this, and I had an idiot way back yonder comment when I first went viral that it doesn't matter as long as he starts at noon. Well, that's why literature matters, dum-dum. That's why you look like the guy you claim you're against. You look like a dum-dum too. Because the literature matters. It says in the 20th Amendment, it reads like this. It says, the president's term shall end at noon. The president, meaning the present president, shall end at noon. And then it says this little thing right here. It says, the successor shall then begin. That little word then is what they call a moneymaker. Because that little word right there shows skills. It shows punctuation. It shows grammar. It shows that you read or you didn't read. It says shall then begin, meaning that president gets to end at noon, and then this next president shall come on over here. It says shall then begin. I guess that's why every other president in U.S. history swore in from 12:01 to 12:05 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I guess that's why. I guess that's why we have no proof of any other president swearing in before 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's why when people say, look at this guy, it's because of that. It's not because you're struggling. It's because of those people. But it helps the people who are on the fence go, oh, it makes sense now. Then the National Guard, well, first off, he didn't even do a review of the troops that day. You're supposed to do a review of the troops, walk through. You saw President Trump do that. He walks through and he looks at the troops. Joe didn't do that. The National Guard turned their backs on the motorcade. Not a single National Guard or soldier, it doesn't matter who they were. You can't tell sometimes in uniforms when the vehicle's going so fast. It doesn't matter. No one saluted the motorcade. We always salute a president and a moving flag. The flag is actually more important than the president in another manner. All right, because there could have been a moving flag on another vehicle, and we'd have saluted it, and you could have had, name somebody. It could have been like all the people, the people from The View in there. We'd be saluting the flag, not the idiots from The View, right? So that matters. Then a new one. This is a new one. Now it's not new in another way, but this is new, a new little revelation. So Garth Brooks sang Amazing Grace, which is a funeral song, by the way. If you type in Google #1 funeral song, Amazing Grace pops up. All right. So he sings Amazing Grace at, it's supposed to be a happy day. Why didn't they have someone there like, I don't know, maybe like Charlie Pride or someone like that, that's black, and they were like singing, oh, happy day, oh, happy day, Joe Biden's gonna take all the swamp away. Oh no, we had to have Amazing Grace. Oh, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Amazing Grace? We can't have Achy Breaky Heart or the Funky Call Medina or something like that on a happy day? We can't have a happy song? We gotta hear Amazing Grace? With a guy who just got 81 million votes sitting in his whitey tighties in his boxers, ladies and gentlemen. We got to hear Amazing Grace, a funeral song on the happy day. George Strait was just recognized by President Trump for the Kennedy Center honorees. Guess who was just on stage with George Strait in Texas for the relief fund for the flood? Garth Brooks. Uh-oh. Look at all the Republicans and conservatives who labeled him as deep state, deep swamp, traitor. Look at all these people. See, that's why I tell people, be careful. He's a liberal. He's identified more with a liberal. But be careful. Special operations requires what? Special operators. And I'm getting sick and tired of you idiots out there who say this is Illuminati and Space Force. It's not. It's tip of the spear, special operations. All the laws and orders show so. Then, at the cannons, The first set they showed you. They showed the 3 cannons at Arlington for Joe. There was not a commissioned officer present. Army regulations, you could be the gayest gay, atheist in the military. Doesn't matter. You could be that commissioned officer, and you could be the gayest gay, atheist of atheists, God haters. Has nothing to do with anything. There was not a commissioned officer present. That is a violation of Army Regulation 600-25. Straight out the gate. Plus, they were all fat. They were out of shape. They were what we call in the military campmate tape. They use the old measuring tapes in the military, the slinky ones, where they put it around you and they measure you. It's what they call campmate tape. They were moving around. There was no military bearing whatsoever with those troops that they showed for quote-unquote Joe. First time in U.S. history they've even shown cannons at Arlington, because it's not a 21-gun salute. And how people struggle with that is beyond me. But then again, 50%, the data shows 54% of America read or comprehend at a 6th grade education and below. So that's why I guess I can't expect people to go to Arlington National Cemetery.mil, the official site for Arlington, the most prestigious of all the memorial graveyards out there. But they're all prestigious, should be, and they are, to us veterans and us people who care. But Arlington's the most known. Arlington National Cemetery, it says, the 3-volley salute seen or heard at Arlington is not to be confused with the 21-gun salute. The 3-volley salute is a military funeral. And that's why I love haters for this one reason. Haters actually prove more of the operation than anything. 2 years ago, a person claiming that they were Army veterans said, I finally got Derek Jonhson. I finally got him. Finally got him. The cannons at Arlington are always there. Gotcha. You just proved the whole thing. Because the first time in U.S. history that they've ever shown the cannons at Arlington, it's the location and it's the date. This was January the 20th, 2021. The first time they've ever shown the cannons for a president, they show them at Arlington, not the National Capital Region. So you can take President Trump this year and President Trump from 2017 and all the way back to Richard Nixon. You can look and guess where the cannons are. Not at Arlington. The first time in U.S. history on January the 20th, Inauguration Day, the first time in U.S. history they showed cannons for the quote-unquote what people thought was the president was at Arlington, which is a funeral service. The cannons are always at Arlington because you know why the cannons are at Arlington? Because Arlington is a what? Cemetery. Why else would the cannons be at Arlington? Hey everybody, August 24th, 2025, on my 3-year anniversary, we're going to Arlington National Cemetery and we're going to have a party! Woo! You know how disrespectful that will be? You know how disrespectful that sounds? To go celebrate at a memorial cemetery? Anything that will be celebratory outside of celebrating someone's life that they just passed away, that gave their life for this nation, whether they died in military or not. See, if people would just apply common sense, but we finding out people ain't got no common sense. All right, and then the biggie. They told you that day that the official presidential salute battery, the 3rd Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard, was with whom? President Trump. They also told you that day, what? What did they tell you? They told you that President Trump had the what? Nuclear football. And he wouldn't give it to whom? Joe. Guess who's seen the nuclear football? I've shown you pictures of it. It's not secretive. If you know what you're looking at, they put it for the whole world to see. It's not secretive. If it was secretive, I'd have someone knocking on my door saying, hey, don't do that. Or they'd, shut my podcast down. Or remove that picture. I put a little red box around it showing you, here's a nuclear football. I've seen it everywhere I've been around President Trump. Nuclear football. There it is. There it is. There it is. There it is. Laura's had it in her photos. All of them's had it in their photos. There's the nuclear football. It's a unique looking case. It don't look like any other case. The one time they showed the quote-unquote nuclear football with quote-unquote Joe, the Army uniform was jacked up. I mean, everything was jacked. So they told you that day. They showed you President Trump with the inauguration service, the 21-gun salute, the 4 cannons were with him at Joint Base Andrews, 3 cannons with Joe, funeral. Closed case. There's nothing to argue, nothing to debate. You either want to know Army regulations or you can just keep crapping on it. Either way, that's what you're doing. You either know it or you crap on it. There's no middle ground. And what goes with that is, to this day, if you go over to the Google and you type in Army retirement letter, I wish I could pull it up and show you. It's called the Army Presidential Retirement Letter. To this day, if you go over there, let me see if it'll pull up. We'll read it. It says myarmybenefits.us.army.mil /benefit-library /federal-benefits /retirement-letters *serve equals 128. All right, now you don't have to put all that in, but I'm just reading that for the sake of it. It is the official Army website. It's not frozen in time, none of those. This is live, official. Retirement letters. A presidential letter of appreciation. 30 plus years of service. You scroll down. Active duty military retirement letter from former presidents. President Donald John Trump, President Barack Obama, President George W. Bush, President William J. Clinton. Where's Joe Biden? Nowhere to be found. So there's layers and layers and layers and layers of proof. I can't cover it all in one video. I used to could, but I can't now. It's just layers and layers and layers. Now, one other thing I'm going to address while I'm on here, just for the fun of it, is this. Since we're having fun, might as well keep it going. I posted recently on Instagram. Those of you who follow me on Instagram, you're going to have to get off of Instagram. I can only do videos on here. If you want to know what's going on lawfully, then you're going to have to come to my pages where I break down things where you can, I put up long posts, but it gives you receipts of .mil, .gov. You have to piece it together. That's why my books are #1 bestsellers. All right, and I don't have one sitting here with me, but it's all right. The Midnight Rider Rides Again, Part 1 and Part 2. They're #1 bestsellers, and they're a chronological order of everything. That way you don't have to go put all this together. It's already in a book, and you can just follow it. Now, if you can't afford the book, I get it. It ain't about buying the book at the end of the day. It's about everything in the chronological order if you want to know. But if you want to know, my Facebook, my Telegram are the ones that give you the longest without, limiting characters and all that, so I can put up long things. You have to click on that and read it. You have to try to piece it together, but you can't piece stuff together until you have a foundation of the 3 branches of government, how they function and operate, president, vice president, generals, whatever. Military is where most people are struggling, though, because you don't have an extensive military, and I get that, because if you weren't in it, I get it. And then you got to want to know, but, you got to want to know. So that's why I did the books, is I put that in the most watered down form that are still factual with the laws and orders, but watered down meaning like where it's easier to comprehend. But my Facebook provides that, and my Telegram provides multiple. And then, of course, my X account, my Twitter, former Twitter, but X, I can put layers up there, but part 1, part 2, part 3. Sometimes I get all the way to part 5, part 7. But I try not to. But You can't have a 150-year-old problem and expect it in a 5-minute answer. That's where most people are struggling. Everybody wants a 5-star filet mignon, and they want it in a cheap microwave, and it don't work like that. All right. So the one last thing that's so humorous to me, I put it up on Instagram, and I'm getting bombed with photo, man, everything. It's so funny. Like, one is the tip of the spear. This is not Illuminati. Every time you see someone around President Trump or President Trump doing this, that's not some kind of bull. I had one say something about, oh, this is what they teach you when you're in speech, when you're nervous. You think President Trump's nervous, or this is a relaxation? Come on, people. I mean, there's so much layers and layers and layers of laws and orders that outline a special, unique, strategic operation, unconventional warfare, irregular warfare, that makes President Trump unique. It's why he has the dash on the ball cap, ladies and gentlemen. Come on. This is not Illuminati. It's not Space Force either. Tip of the spear. Special operations. There were 3 things that were consistent around quote-unquote Joe. 3. Only 3. 3 things. Uno, dos, tres. No cuatro. Uno, dos, tres. 3 things that were consistent around quote-unquote Joe from 2021 to 2025. Only 3. Insignia. The same insignia that you saw walk down behind President Trump January the 20th, 2017, when he said, right at the moment, he said, we're taking the power out of D.C. and giving it back to you, the people. See, everything from 2017 to 2021 was unique laws and orders that set up the visual of the wartime, government in exile, puppet government, unconventional warfare, irregular warfare, of what you witnessed from 2021 to 2025, because Joe was an actor. It's all going to, history's going to account for it. I hope you live long enough, because if you do, I'm going to virtually slap some of you. God love you! God love you. Right? It'll be like a loving kind of virtual slap. Just going to try to smile. Try to do like the fake Joe, actor Joe. Fake Joe, when he tried to smile, he looked like he was witnessing Rosie O'Donnell mud wrestling a pig. All right? Naked. Right? So, some of you are struggling because you either don't know that you don't know, or you want to stay in this. This exists not because of me. This wasn't put there to sell books or anything. It wasn't put here to validate Derek Jonhson and to validate Derek Jonhson only. This wasn't that. This is President Trump validating the operation, validating the wartime strategies, tactics, unconventional warfare, irregular warfare, all of that, laws and orders of it. It wasn't put here for me. It just so happens that I had everything already in the documents.info, the documents that I published January 2021, that became the books, the Midnight Rider Rides Again Part 1, which was December 2023, and then Part 2, I went over from that date to January the 20th, 2025, but also put in more special operations. Part 3, the finale, will be everything you witnessed from January 20, 2025 to 2029. Which it'll take a little bit of time to get to that one. But it'll be for record's sake and history's sake and for people who want the bookend of all this. But President Trump didn't do this for me, but he put this here April the 2nd, 2023, which was a year and 7 months before November the 5th, 2024. So he was claiming I'm 45, 46, and 47. He was already claiming 47 a year and 7 months before, and he was also claiming 46. That's what the dash means, continuous, through. But laws and orders back that up too. So anybody who keeps pushing this off as Space Force, Illuminati, and resting position, the only thing resting is your IQ if you have any. Sorry, that ain't no other way there's no other way to do that lovingly. When you want change, that requires doing what's different. There's a quote out there that says, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is insanity. So this shows that President Trump is unique and different than any other time period in United States history for presidential sake. The other thing that people are struggling with, mainly on Instagram, but a lot on Facebook. God love you on Facebook. Lord have mercy. I don't know how the Catholics do it, but no offense to the good Lord if that's the right way and the right path. But whichever way y'all go with it, that, this, that, and other, and everything. If you can't comprehend what I'm about to say, I don't know what can help you. But I just told a friend of mine yesterday, I said, I'm gonna do, a lot of you have been in business before, you've tried to get a job in the old school where you had to have a resume and then you had to have a cover letter. I'm gonna do a cover letter, a fake cover letter, because I don't need a job. I'm retired military, don't need one. But I'm gonna do a fake cover letter that is me wanting to be a body double for someone famous. And I'm going to put in there, it says, hey, look, though, I'm good at playing golf. I'm good at drinking beer. I'm good at drinking the mimosa. I can put my little pinky up when I need to. I know how to play the fork game and the spoon game. I know how to process elimination. I know when to sit there. I know when to be etiquette. I know when to talk. I know when to shut up. I can do everything. I'll drive the golf cart. I'll ride in it. I'll do whatever I got to do. Give me your Rolls Royce. Give me your Lamborghini. Give me your Ferrari. Give me what you got. I need the keys to your big penthouse suite. I need the keys to your mansion. Whatever you got. I'm good for it. I'm game for it. I can fit in any scenario. All right. But here's what I'm not going to do. Whenever you need to make a public appearance, I won't be at that. When you need to make a speech somewhere, I won't be doing that either. All right? I'm not going to be doing anything that requires public speaking, public appearances, or anything. I'm not going to get shot at. You are. All right? If you can't understand that, ladies and gentlemen, you might need to pick up pickleball, crocheting, and rock skipping. The last I just saw on ESPN, they got now rock skipping championships. There's a sport for you out there. There's something that'll pick you up that'll match your IQ. That you can have fun with, and you might even get you a trophy to put on your mantle back here. I don't even have it. I got one trophy back here. But other than that, if you can't comprehend that the President Trump that you're looking at is not the real president, your IQ is in trouble. And I can't help you. I can't make them boost up. I can't do anything to boost your IQ. I can't do anything about that. If I could, but God, oh Lord, help me into everything, I'd make you comprehend. Why? See, here's what gets you. Here's what gets everybody. The picture that I put up of President Trump December the 2nd, 2022, on my Instagram and on my Facebook. The picture I put up, half the comments, if not more, that's not real Donald Trump. That's the fake one. Some were smart aleck. Some goes, well, that's not the real President Trump, but I've never been around the real one or the double. So congrats to Derek Jonhson. I've heard every comment there is known to man. So once you acknowledge there's a double, guess what you just did? You just trapped yourself. You just trapped yourself because you just acknowledged there's two, if not more, but a minimum of two. So now that you've done that, and now that people have done that, guess what that means? There is. When you look at the nose, you look at the chin, you look at the structure, you look at the complexion, orange versus pale. I'm pale as pale can get. Let me just show you. Looking at it right there. And the lower it goes, the whiter I get. I am 90-something% Irish and English. I got some Sweden in me, Norwegian in me, and a little bit of Native American in me. I'm not Pocahontas, though. I got way more than Elizabeth Warren's got. I got way more than Elizabeth Warren. So I won't be getting no nickname from President Trump. I won't be no sitting bull or some kind of, like that. Talking turkey or whatever. I ain't gonna get no any name from President Trump. All right, I ain't gonna be none of that. Yeah. So once you acknowledge there's a double, then you got to look at the features. President Trump is German and basically English descent. You know how white we are from England? You know how white we are? And why does he have a handle called Real Donald Trump? Why isn't it just Donald Trump? Why? Why does the press secretary, why does she tell you to go check out Truth Social and what the president says? Why is it on Truth Social that President Trump puts up over and over and over and over and over again the real President Trump himself? Why is it that the President Trump that everybody thinks is the real President Trump, the one in the blue suit and the red tie, why is it that President Trump has never been filmed or photographed on the golf course? That solves it all right there, because here's why. There's a few reasons for fun and good and honesty. President Trump's not a liar. Liberals think he is. Democrats think he is. He's not a liar. Golf is a sport that's an independent sport, meaning it's all on you. I've played golf. I was a 2 handicap in high school. Now, I can pull out my old golf photos, and I can pull out my golf bag from my high school. It's dirty, but I still have my golf bag with name on it and everything. I got my old photos. I can pull out my yearbook. We can prove this all day long. I was a 2 handicap. My dad's a scratch golfer. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't understand golf, that means on any given day, my dad could go out on a golf course, and he could play par golf, meaning whatever par was for that course, a 70, 71, or 72, my dad could play par golf. Maybe under par, maybe a little over, but on average, he could play par golf. A 2 handicap, that means on average, on any given day, when I was a 2 handicap, I could go to any golf course in this nation and be within 2 shots of par, maybe shoot par, maybe shoot under, but more than likely 2 to 3 shots over par. That's what that means. That means I was a dang good golfer. My dad was a dang good golfer. He was a good golfer. When President Trump made fun of quote-unquote Joe for saying Joe said on the debate he was a 6 handicap, and President Trump laughed at that, which means President Trump is a better handicap than that. Now, what liberals will also do that you don't want to do, it don't matter how ugly President Trump's shot looks, his swing, it don't matter. He's got a swing that fits him. When my dad got up in his 70s, my dad adjusted his swing to play what they call a fade. Golfers will know what I'm talking about. It's a certain shot where it's a certain look too. My dad played a fade, and he was good at playing a fade. And when you first see the ball, it looks like it was going to go off this way, and it'll fall in like that. There's all kinds of tactics in golf that most people don't even know about. You can hood a ball on purpose, depending on if you're in the rough or if you're in a place where you need to make a ball go out or make it go this way. There's all kinds of things that most people don't think of. So if President Trump was lying, even something as simple and as innocent as golf, that would be a lie if President Trump was sitting there making fun of quote-unquote Joe for saying he had a 6 handicap and he could whoop his ass all around the course. That would be a lie. So how come the President Trump that's at the rallies, that's at the events, that's at these meetings, has never been photographed or filmed on a golf course? Why is it the President Trump that I'm in the photos with is the one on the golf course, is the one photographed on the golf course, is the one filmed on the golf course? Explain that. You can't, because it's truth. So once you admit there's a double, then you have to go into facts. And the facts are just that. All right, you don't put the real person. You don't put the double, first off. Let's go back to the double. You don't go back to the double and say, golf course, he don't drink, but whatever. He drinks waters, gets to play golf all day, gets to sit there and eat fine dine. I've been to his places that are private. It is good food. Let me go ahead and tell you. I got a little something going on right here because I'm getting older and my metabolism's slowing down. And let me tell you what, Miss Mary Trump's meatloaf is insane. You're talking about good. The meatloaf's good. Everything's good at Mar-a-Lago. Everything's good at Trump International. Everything's good. Let me go ahead and tell you right now. The burgers are off the chain, too. All right? So, again, why would the double get to chill with members who already know him? They were already there. Members know the real President Trump. Members aren't there going, they don't act like that. You would, and that's okay. You've never been around someone that's famous? You should act like that if you love that person. Fine, do that. But the members aren't doing that. Members aren't doing that. It's that old saying, act like you've been there before. Well, they act like they've been there before because they have been there before, and they are there. So, you don't need a double in private. And you don't put the real guy, if you have a double, you don't still put the real guy out in public to get shot at. Get the, you know what, out of here. I wish I had a freaking northern accent. Get out of here. Come on, people. Use your brains. But even if you got a little brain, use it. Golly, fire the extra little mouse up there, the little gerbil. Come on, man. Get to spinning, bro. Apply logic. So see, once you acknowledge there's a double, gotcha. And it ain't about me being around him. It's about tactics, strategies, and because we have that as a tactic and a strategy, that's why. And then the other thing. It's a special operation, so the president's not required at the capacity of what you think is a president, which is also why Speaker of the House, Mike Jonhson, told you just a couple months ago when he was asked, I got the video, I'll share it again, got the video, he says what? They ask him, what's your typical role as a Speaker of the House? Why of all times in freaking United States history are we asking the Speaker of the House what his role is? Have you not seen a Speaker of the House ever before in history? And then he tells you, well, I don't really have a set schedule as a wartime speaker. I ought to take my hat off like McClintock, John Wayne, and just spin it and just throw it. But this is one of my better hats, and I don't want to do that. But I ought to just take my hat and just spin it on something like that and be like, mic drop. Right? It's all there, ladies and gentlemen. It's all there. You got to have a foundation. And if you want to know what's going on, then you got to elevate yourself. And that's going to require this. Now, I sound harsh, and I do, and I am sometimes. But it's because I know what I know, and I know why I was put here, and I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Laws and orders are laws and orders, and they're being enforced. The ones that are being enforced are all unique, strategic, and special. All right, it's not a normal presidency. Therefore, it don't require a normal president. All right, that's why President Trump and the liberals are bashing him for playing golf as much as he does. But it's all going to be unveiled. So if you're still on the fence, or if you're still in that gray zone, whatever you're in, if you want to know, that's the key thing. If you want to know, then you got to have a little thing called initiative. And then once you get that initiative, then you got to read and study. If you get frustrated, put it down. Don't get mad about it. Go back to it. When I was learning to play guitar, my grandpa said, don't get frustrated at it. The guitar didn't do anything to you. It's an object. It has no feelings, no emotions. You do. Don't get mad at it. Don't get frustrated. At the moment you get frustrated, put it down. Go play pickleball. Go play golf. Go hiking. Go fishing. Go knitting. Do something. Get away from it. Go back to it. Because this is happening no matter what. And the more the haters, the more the idiots, the more the comments, the more the bashers, all they do is show that they can't compete because they can't compare. Their intelligence can't compare. And it's not bragging about because I have the intelligence. It's not that. God put me here for you to lead you out of the wilderness. All right, to lead you to the receipts, to the facts of what President Trump's working with, which is military first, federal second. They're condensing down the federal government, getting it back small, putting it back more in the hands of the states, and then also states are being cleaned out as well. So the 2017 to 2021 was a clean out of the legislative, 2021 to 2025 was a clean out of the executive, and what you're watching right now is a clean out of the judicial branch. All right, the laws and orders outline that. What you got to have is a foundation of all of the definitions, the literature, the verbiage, the everything. The index, the glossary, everything. You got to have that first. Then you got to know how to pair it all together. And you don't want to complicate it. So that's what I've tried to do is condense this down into a chronological order. But where we are right now, more Americans should be awake. Ain't no doubt. More Americans, especially Republicans, especially conservatives, especially patriots. No one right now should be arguing with me, trashing me, bashing me. Those who do, more than likely are deep state and or too incompetent to comprehend. There should be no problem with unique, strategic, special laws and orders that outline a unique, strategic, special operation using unconventional and irregular warfare. There should be no problem with a retired veteran showing people public laws and orders and how they pair. Anyone who has a problem with that has a problem with not me. They have a problem with President Donald John Trump, which shows their what? True colors. Therefore, you should stay off their page. If it's not love, power, sound mind, even if it shows a little passion like I do. But if it's not giving you something you can tangibly put your eyes on, your ears on, that provides a solution, not a perspective that gets you riled up, mad, angry, bitter, sad, frustrated, angry, all these things. If it does that to you, you don't need to be listening to it. Because I can tell you right now, what these patriots who follow me know, it don't provide that. You should only have smiles, excitement, flexing your muscles, pumped up, every kind of positive comment, every kind of spiritual comment, every kind of positive feeling, every kind of spiritual feeling. You should have that for what's been going on. So if you don't find yourself on a page that's bashing, trashing, doing anything like that, there's a difference in bashing and trashing versus defending yourself. All I do is defend myself, and I'm not going to sit here and let some of these people talk about me like they have. I'm going to defend myself. All right. I don't talk about people on the front because you don't have to. The people who are talking on the front are because they're not doing what? Exactly what they're supposed to be doing. So that's why I get passionate. The answers are there. It's a blueprint. The blueprint is very clear once you have the blueprint. Once you have the blueprint, that's all you need. Don't deviate from it until you know it like the back of your eyelids. Once you do that, then you can start navigating out and looking at different things. So, you know, it's been a fun week, man. I mean, all the Russiagate, Obama hasn't posted but once or two times every month. Michelle hadn't posted since June 19th. Comey hadn't posted since June the 10th. I mean, all this stuff's setting up the stage. The Hunter and Melania is setting the stage. It's setting the stage, and it's getting there. So you just got to hang tight, but it's all there. It's all on my pages, and all you got to do is find those. And speaking of that, there's a ton of fakes out there. Lord help us, Lord. Oh, the fakes and the frauds. They never show my videos where I tell exactly my links. So I'm going to have to do every video this way from here out. So every one of my links, if it's not on my link tree, it's not my account, ladies and gentlemen. So my link tree is linktr.ee/1776 Nation. On that link tree, you'll be able to find my X account has a blue check. That's at Rattletrap1776. It has a blue check. My music page and my Instagram are tied together, but they have a blue check. It's at Derek Jonhson Country. They have a blue check. My True Social now has a red check. It's at Derek Jonhson. If I'd have known I was going to be going viral and I was going to be put in this position, I'd have made all my names all the same. But it didn't happen that way. On there, though, on my blue checks and my red check, I will verify my other accounts that don't have a red or a blue check, which I don't have another True Social, so I wouldn't have no need for another red. But all my others, so my 1776 Nation page and Rattletrap 1776. So that's how you find me on all those. Linktree, L-I-N-K, the period goes between the R and the first E. L-I-N-K-T-R period, E-E, backslash 1776 Nation. As it sounds. No underscores, no anything else. Be careful. Some people will add an extra 7 due to font, or an extra 1. You got to look very close if you're older, no offense, or maybe you're just bad eyesight, but whichever you are, they'll put an extra number in there sometimes, or an extra letter if it's real slender of a font. You got to be careful. Sometimes they'll put an extra I or an extra T or something of that nature. You got to be careful. All right, so the other thing is I put all these videos over on Rumble. So I'll have the link, and I'll post that because it don't post on Instagram. It posts a video on the page, but afterwards, the aftermath, all the comments removed on Instagram, you have to go back to the Instagram and put your comments back up if you want me to see them, because it removes them after the live, and then it's free game again. But also on Facebook, if you want the link for your friends and family, it'll be up on my accounts that I can post to with the actual link. Instagram don't provide that. So, but hey, we're having a fun time, and we just need to keep sharing everything, keep sharing all these things for people. We're headed to we're in the golden age. You just haven't seen it as much yet, but we're there. It's gonna be fun. 250th, it's going to be fun, a 250th birthday, so anyway, but hey, hang in there, Patriots, hang in there. We got this. Everything you're seeing, don't react to it. We got all this. Nothing to react to. All right, the boss man is in control. Like that, baby.